Hi, I'm Dr. Rayshawn Ray, aim to speak truth to power, and this is my daily thought. We're seeing what Make America Great Again really means. Essentially, it's a 21st century New Deal. And part of that is thinking about the ability for whites who embrace Make America Great Again to sow their royal oats. Part of that is seeing the over 900 hate crimes that have transpired since Trump's election, mostly targeted at uh, at individuals who are marginalized, whether they be immigrants, whether they be blacks, whether they be Latinos, whether that be women, whether that be members of the LGBTQ community, all of the people who Trump targeted during his campaign. We are seeing his supporters act this out in celebration. I mean, we are seeing white supremacists having meetings who, alt-right is just a new term for white supremacy, having meetings across the street from the White House. And in many respects, this is Trump has essentially given some whites who embrace Make America Great Again and embrace white privilege the license to put non-whites in their place. And for other whites, when we think about white privilege, it's the ability for whites to exert their full white privilege, or for others to at least be okay with it, to not say anything about it. And I mean, and when we think about these hate crimes, I mean, it's not just about, the words that people are saying, right? Whether they be get in the back of the bus or get out of my country, but instead it's the heinous acts like the burnings, the cuttings, the beatings, and children participating and being the victims in these particular incidents. When we talk about that we're supposedly progressing by age, I mean, we're seeing that's not the case at all. That most of the incidents that we know about are happening in educational institutions, whether that be in elementary schools, on buses, in college. And that becomes even scarier when we can't protect people at some of our most sacred institutions where people are getting educated at. And that's disheartening for a person like myself who actually works at these particular institutions. So, when we talk about white supremacy is not just delivered in social interaction. I mean, instead, it's going to be enacted in policy. And that's what makes it similar to the New Deal. I mean, whether that be these racist appointments of Jeff Sessions or Steve Bannon. I mean, when it comes to Jeff Sessions, I mean, he's one of the people who, in the 1980s, during a Republican-controlled Congress and Senate, he was ruled unfit because of his racist comments. Whether they be calling the NAACP or the National Urban League as being something that we shouldn't necessarily pay attention to, calling them racist organizations, calling them names. I mean, these are the sorts of things that we talk about. I mean, and then Steve Bannon, I mean, he's running Breitbart. I mean, they make some of the most sensational claims as being part of the alt-right. He's one of these people where Trump says, I don't think he's racist, even though he's been a part of some things that's been racist. Sounds like he's racist. And at the least, he's okay with all of it. And he's not going to condemn it, and he's not going to do anything about it. And that's what's part of the problem. So we could essentially see another Jim Crow. I think people forget that after the Civil War, during Reconstruction, we had a period of massive racial progress where we started seeing blacks gain political representation. We started seeing them gain economic stability. And then all of a sudden we had the period of the nadir. And with Woodrow Wilson and other presidents came Jim Crow at the end of the 1800s, early 1900s. And then we hit the Great Depression. And then all of a sudden we saw the New Deal. The New Deal was to get us out of the stock market crash of 1929, where the unemployment rate was like 30 to 40% of the U.S. population. I mean, nothing like what we saw. I mean, the recession doesn't even compare to that. And one of the most heralded presidents, that being Franklin D. Roosevelt, who was one of my favorite presidents. I actually love going to his Smithsonian monument. Really, I mean, it's essentially like a course, if you will, of laying out his quotes and looking at the things he did, and the fact that he was a 4-term president. But see, there's something that he did. He made a bargain that became highly problematic, which was part of the New Deal. See, the thing people don't know about the New Deal did two main things. First, it implemented the GI Bill, which still to this day is one of the largest federal funding initiatives in history. I mean, well over $82 billion for veterans who have fought in war, and who have served our country. But it was originally set for World War II veterans. 8 out of 10 men born during the 1920s were impacted by the GI Bill and the New Deal. Part of that meant they could go to school, they could send their children to school, they could get business grants, they could get home loan grants. And I shouldn't even say loans; they just got grants as down payments on homes. This essentially set the middle class to know that existed that we know today. But this was the thing; it was essentially the white middle class. And this is why. Because on the other side of the GI Bill, we had Social Security. And there were two main occupations excluded from Social Security. That was domestic and farm work. Studies show that over 60% of blacks and 75% of blacks in the South did domestic and farm work. I mean, that's what black people did during that time. They knew how to farm and they knew how to do domestic work, because these were the jobs they were primarily relegated to during slavery, and even after that time period. So we're talking about a 50-year time period between the time that slavery ended and the time that the New Deal transpired. Essentially, yeah, like 35, maybe 65 years or so. So the other part of the GI Bill, not only were blacks excluded from Social Security because of those occupations, but many of them also didn't get the GI Bill. That's because even though blacks and whites were fighting together in World War II, and we can't forget that the Japanese were interned in the United States at this particular time, and this is some of the statements that some of the people in President-elect Trump's cabinet has said they want to do with Muslims, mind you, is intern them in the United States, not just a registry, but taking this a whole lot farther. And when we think about this in this particular context, you had blacks and whites fighting together in World War II. When they returned home, and we also can't forget that women were working in factories during this time, while men were gone off to war, and in occupations that men said that women couldn't do. And then, of course, when men got back, they just shuttled women on back to the household as if they weren't necessarily good at what they were doing in factories, and at times, oftentimes better than men. So the GI Bill was mandated federally but distributed locally. This means that veterans, when they were, say, in Tennessee or in Indiana, that what happened was black veterans did not get these same benefits. They did not get the money to go to college. They did not get the down payment assistance on homes. They did not get the money for the money to start up businesses. Instead, they were relegated to historically black colleges and universities. And then, if they were lucky, got the opportunity after getting a bachelor's degree from one of these schools to go on somewhere else. So see, the thing is, the people get messed up. It wasn't that whites got something that wasn't due them. No, whites got something that was due them. The problem is that blacks did not get something that was due them. And so this is what's part of this 21st century New Deal, is the way that we are seeing the way these things are playing out. Now, there's some other people who are saying, well, people just need to just accept the results. But see, this is the problem. Many people didn't accept Obama, and still don't. And part of Trump's election, isn't about Obama or about Hillary. Instead, it's about a white lashing, as Van Jones would say, as a response to our first black president. And see, this is one of the ways we see white privilege playing out. See, whites who had the ability to act like racism isn't a part of our daily lives. And part of our daily lives means our culture and our structure as America, means that they also have the ability to not see police brutality that's always transpired in black and brown neighborhoods. See, that is inherently about white privilege. And it's something that Peggy McIntosh has talked about, who is one of the key people to talk about white privilege. McIntosh defines whiteness as an invisible package of unearned assets that can be cashed in daily, but is meant to remain oblivious. See, not having to acknowledge structural racism or interpersonal racism is the ability to make other people invisible. It's the ability to make other people remain oblivious. And so white privilege is like an invisible, weightless knapsack of special provisions, assurances, tools, maps, guides, code books, passports, visas, clothes, compasses, emergency gear, and blank checks. And this is the reason why Martin Luther King Jr., some of the things that people don't necessarily want to acknowledge that he said when he was like, we coming to Washington to cash our check. The check of reparations, the check of structural racism, the check of the legacy of Jim Crow. And now that check is growing, as is going to be the legacy of Trump, and the fact that the Republican Party has let that brew, and the fact that people who supported Trump or who didn't say anything to their family members who supported Trump are also implicit in this, because they don't have the same implications that we do as far as being invested in this. So see, as we think about this, many people viewed the elections and the candidacies of President Barack Obama and Secretary of State Clinton as progress, while others viewed it as losing some of these unearned assets, this ability to write these blank checks of whiteness, even among poor whites. And see, that becomes important because Lyndon B. Johnson spoke to this best. He said, "I tell you what gets to the bottom of it. If you can convince the lowest white man he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice you're picking his pocket. He'll give you somebody to look down on, and he'll empty his pockets for you." And that's what we're seeing in some of the policies that Trump is already talking about implementing. I mean, it's no way that these sort of things are good for poor whites. But see, this is the thing. Trump didn't just get support from poor whites. See, that's oblivious. He got support across the social class gradient, and he also got overwhelming support from women, all different groups of women, whether they be Protestant women, whether they be middle-aged women, whether they be obviously conservative women. So we see that across the board, the support that he got from white women. And this is because all white people have something to lose, which is their ability to know that they are better than another group and at times treat other people like second-class citizens. So see, our country's racism is embedded in the soil that we walk on every day. Trump just allowed it to grow and watered it on people's front yards. Whereas before, it was simply growing in people's homes as part of the silent majority, just waiting on their opportunity to strike again. So see, we actually need to drain a swamp. We need to drain the swamp on racism. And right now, the racists are back in the swamp of the federal government, and they are populating it. So as always, conversations matter like Black Lives and Books, and I hope this has sparked one.